Amazing single father stands up for humiliated woman. Discover the transformative thing she did. Nick Parker sat quietly in the back of the bustling school board meeting, his janitorial uniform a stark contrast to the crisp suits surrounding him. He held a flimsy paper cup filled with lukewarm coffee, its weak scent barely strong enough to distract him from the tension in the air. Just as he settled in, a wave of gossip hit him like a slap. The new art teacher, Sarah Thompson, was in the spotlight, and not for her talents. The rich parents were picking her apart, their laughter slicing through the room. Art programs? Really? Those kids need real skills, one wealthy father scoffed, his dismissive tone echoing among nods of agreement. Nick's heart raced as he held his breath, recognizing the sting of judgment and the invisible weight of being underestimated. Here they were, tearing down a woman who simply wanted to inspire creativity in their children. Nick clenched his fists, the battle between loyalty to Sarah and fear of his own insignificance rising within him. Was he in a position to stand up? Was he worthy of being heard when others only saw him as just a janitor? Each snicker from the crowd was a reminder of his own insecurities. They think they're better, he thought, and a familiar feeling washed over him. His heart sank as he grappled with the noise of doubt in his mind. After the meeting, Nick approached Sarah, who looked defeated, her shoulders hunched under a weight of criticism. "You're doing a good thing," he said, his voice a quiet reassurance amidst her turmoil. As they spoke, she revealed a secret, a flicker of hope in her eyes, a passion for digital art she had buried beneath expectations. Nick felt the fire of her enthusiasm, editing his own response. Yes, he was just a janitor, but he wanted to champion her. Their shared dream of an art show blossomed, but with it, Nick's doubts seeped into his thoughts. How could he, a janitor, support a woman striving for recognition? As the days passed, the burden of his role began to weigh heavily. Nick watched Sarah flourish, her paintings gaining attention, yet anguish gripped him like a vice. Each compliment she received turned the knife deeper. With every stroke of her brush, the question nagged, what right did he have to champion her? Would they ever see him as more than the janitor who cleaned their floors? The disdain reflected in the sneers of those affluent parents was paralyzing. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where. But then doubt clawed at him again. What if this was just a fleeting moment? What if he returned to his reality, unseen, unheard, invisible once more? Yet he pushed through, his determination hardening. I believe in what Sarah is doing. I believe in the power of art to motivate, to heal, and to challenge societal norms. We cannot stifle that because we don't get it. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you truly care about the future of these kids, then you must embrace the diverse skills and talents they can develop through art, just as much as you hope for their mastery in mathematics or literature. For the first time that evening, Nick saw a flicker of recognition and even a nod of agreement from a few seated at the back. Shifting his stance, he fortified his resolve. I might not wear a suit, but just like any parent in this room, I want the best for our children, and I'm not afraid to call out the ignorance if it means providing them with the opportunities they deserve. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you truly care about the future of these kids, then you must embrace the diverse skills and talents they can develop through art, just as much as you hope for their mastery in mathematics or literature. For the first time that evening, Nick saw a flicker of recognition and even a nod of agreement from a few seated at the back. Shifting his stance, he fortified his resolve. I might not wear a suit, but just like any parent in this room, I want the best for our children, and I'm not afraid to call out the ignorance if it means providing them with the opportunities they deserve." As he concluded, an unexpected silence settled over the gymnasium. It felt like a palpable exhalation shared between him and the audience. The tension in his chest dissipated. He had spoken truth, however unbeknownst to those around him. It was a tentative victory, but it felt monumental to him. In those brief moments of connection, something profound shifted within Nick. Maybe he was more than just a janitor. Maybe he was a catalyst for change, an unexpected voice within a sea of privilege. But even as he stood, emboldened by a newfound sense of self, nagging questions loomed large. What would happen when the applause faded? Would he have the courage to continue advocating for those like Sarah, or would he retreat once more into the shadows? As the crowd began to stir, conversations igniting around him, Nick felt the thrill of urgency electrifying his spirit. This wasn't a resolution. It was the beginning of a journey, his own transformation still unfolding. The moment of truth was closer than ever, but the path forward remained uncertain. He realized he had taken a step into the arena, but the bigger battle was just around the corner. What would he do next to solidify this emerging identity? Would he risk everything to fight against the elite's disdain? Determined to find clarity, Nick took a deep breath as he stepped off the stage, ready to face whatever came next. As Nick stepped off the stage, an exhilarating mix of adrenaline and uncertainty surged through him. He surveyed the gymnasium, still buzzing with conversation sparked by his words. Each expression around him registered a spectrum, from skepticism to intrigue. He felt both empowered and vulnerable, as if he had pulled back a curtain to reveal a new facet of himself, yet still feared the shadows lurking behind it. He made his way through clusters of people discussing art, education, and the merits of creativity. Schools. Their voices were a cacophony of opinions that seemed to swirl around him like a tempest. He grasped for the positive exchanges, fueling his resolve. Yet a stomach-churning doubt gnawed at him. Was he prepared to join the fray, to stand against not just societal norms, but the very structures that enforced them? A familiar face broke through the crowd, Sarah, beaming with pride, her demeanor transformative, almost radiant. "You were amazing, Nick!" she exclaimed, her enthusiasm palpable. "I knew you had it in you." Her support was refreshing. Yet, as he smiled back, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. She understood the stakes in a way the others did not. "Thanks, Sarah, but what now?" His voice quavered, betraying the tempest within. "Will this matter? Will they listen?" She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You just created a moment for them to reflect. It's their responsibility to engage, to let it change them. But you have to keep pushing. People like us can't afford to shy away." Her forthrightness sparked something deep in him. He realized that silence was no longer an option. The challenge wasn't just about that moment, it was about building on it. He began to plot his next steps, envisioning how he might leverage this new courage into something larger. As the night wore on, Nick approached various attendees, from teachers to parents, discussing their perspectives on art in education. He found himself in a captivating exchange with a local educator who had always championed creativity. "We need more advocates," she said, "people willing to speak the truth. You did that tonight." Each conversation peeled back layers of apprehension, revealing a conviction that had been dormant within him. He learned about potential community forums, opportunities to engage further with not just his local school, but the broader educational landscape. The more he listened, the more he felt his voice solidifying. By the time he reached the exit, Nick's mind was racing with possibilities, ideas colliding and coalescing into a faint blueprint for action. Could he really be an advocate, not just a voice in the crowd, but a potential leader in local discourse about education? But with promise came the reality of pushback. What if he faced criticism for disrupting the status quo? Memories of past failures whispered in the shadows of his mind. Times he had hesitated, times he had shied away from conflict. Yet, this time he stood a little taller. The fleeting approval of a few was no longer enough. He needed to claim his place. Contentment mingled with anxiety as he walked away, imagining meetings, dialogues, and perhaps the formation of a community task force focused on integrating the arts into educational curricula. But how could he ensure that his voice not only mattered in that moment, but was a lasting presence in the conversation? As he stepped into the cool night, ready to embrace the uncertainty of tomorrow, Nick knew he had a decision to make. Would he continue to cultivate this newfound identity, engage with discomfort, and risk standing alone in his belief system? The real battle to find his voice had begun, uncharted and perilous, yet exhilarating. The echoes of his speech resonated in his mind, calling him to act. Quickly, he realized he'd have to confront not just critics, but the complexities within himself. His next challenge loomed. The time had come to meet the resistance head-on, to embrace the discomfort of being seen. All the hesitation would weigh on his decision. Would he rise to the occasion or retreat to the safety of silence? The moment of clarity was within reach, pushing him ever forward into the murky waters of personal growth. The next morning brought a crispness to the air that filled Nick with resolve. Rising early, he made a steaming cup of coffee, the ritual grounding him before the weight of the day pressed down. It was time to translate the adrenaline of last night's speech into tangible steps. He sat down, pen poised over a blank notebook. The outline of his ambitions loomed large: advocacy, connection, and community engagement. Yet the specifics eluded him. Nick felt both excited and intimidated. How could he be an advocate for something so important? Could he summon the courage to engage with people whose views would likely clash with his? Taking a deep breath, he attempted to capture his thoughts, sketching out ideas. But the words felt hesitant, as if they understood the gravity of the task, yet were terrified to step out onto the page. He quickly dismissed the self-doubt. He remembered Sarah's words, the way they had ignited something in him. This was about more than just voix. It was about creating a ripple effect that could influence not only his own life, but also others who believed art had a rightful place in education. He scribbled "community meeting" at the top of the page, underlined it twice, and sensed an electric thrill. That was it. He needed to start there. But even as he wrote, a voice in his head whispered doubts. What if no one showed up? What if they did, but pushed back harder than he anticipated? A flicker of the past breached his consciousness. The times he had presented ideas only to watch them wilt under scrutiny. The fear of rejection was all too familiar. But rather than succumbing, he noted the fear directly beneath his ambitions, forcing himself to confront it. Rather than propagate that doubt, he asked himself what hidden strength lay beneath it. Over the next few days, Nick reached out to local educators, artists, and parents who shared his vision, inviting them to join him for a discussion on how the arts could enrich their school's curriculum. Each conversation reinforced his purpose, their enthusiasm diminishing his lingering uncertainties. He began drafting a speech aimed at inviting others to see the seemingly simple but profoundly impactful role that art could play in broadening educational horizons. It became clear he was tapping into something deeper, a burning desire to not only advocate but also enlighten those around him. By positioning himself against the existing norms, he was simultaneously wrestling with his own fear of alienation. Would he be rejected by peers and authority figures who felt threatened? The stakes felt alarmingly high. As the day of the meeting approached, Nick's excitement pulsed in tandem with apprehension. He prepared a presentation, carefully plotting the structure while alternating between dry facts and anecdotes that humanized the data. He rehearsed in front of the mirror until he felt comfortable, though still unsure whether to include a more personal narrative, one that exposed his own struggles with art during his childhood. Vulnerability beckoned with its promise of deeper connection, but also with the terrifying risk of exposure. The morning of the meeting arrived. Gathering his notes and a stack of flyers, he felt a surge of self-determination. For the first time, he truly recognized the power within him to inspire change. Yet as he drove to the school, another thought crept in. What was just another cycle of disappointment? Would his efforts fade like the early morning fog, dissipating under the light of judgment? He parked his car and took a deep breath. Stepping inside, the buzz of conversations reached him, echoing his own inner turmoil. Would these conversations help him carve out a defined space for himself? It was now or never. The moment had arrived, the weight of transformation heavy on his shoulders. Every decision and action he'd taken so far stitched together into a fragile fabric of courage. As he approached the auditorium, ready to share not just his ideas but his own story, he questioned if he was truly ready to embrace the vulnerability it would demand, or would he crumble under the weight of it? He crossed the threshold, the room's energy swirling around him like a tempest. Taking a breath, one action became clear. This was his chance to not just connect, but to claim a voice that might finally inspire others in the way he longed to be inspired. And as he began to address the gathering crowd, a singular thought surfaced. Could this moment catalyze a transformation in not only the educational landscape, but also in himself, allowing him to collapse the barriers he had shackled around his own aspirations? Standing at the podium, Nick's heart raced, thumping wildly beneath the weight of collective gazes. The audience was a microcosm of the community. Educators gripping pens, parents leaning forward in their chairs, and a few curious students scattered throughout. In this moment, the adrenaline surged not just from a desire to speak, but from an intrinsic need to share fragments of himself that had long been hidden. He began tentatively, finding his voice amidst a swirl of anxiety. "Thank you all for coming today," he said, his words surfacing with cautious sincerity. As he spoke about the power of art and education, he locked eyes with a few supportive faces. They were familiar, yet they felt like a lifeline, tethering him to confidence. With each sentence he delivered, gathering momentum, he shimmered past the rehearsed script in his mind. Gradually, he allowed himself to weave a personal story into the fabric of his presentation. He shared how art had buffered his childhood insecurities, a refuge in tumultuous times, and how those experiences shaped his understanding of creativity's role in personal growth. As he narrated tales of scrunched-up pieces of paper and hesitant brushstrokes, the audience leaned in. He could see their interest peaking, curiosity igniting in their eyes. The fear constricting his chest began to loosen, replaced with a warmth that coursed through him. This wasn't just a presentation, it was an invitation, a chance to reconnect on a fundamental level. But a creeping uncertainty lingered around the edges, demanding to be acknowledged. Would they accept this version of him? Would exposing his vulnerabilities sway them, or would it be seen as weakness? Internalized doubts clawed at him, but he pressed on, inviting them to consider how art could foster empathy and critical thinking in students, a lifeline for those who, like him, felt like outsiders. He punctuated his arguments with the enthusiasm of his growing conviction, channeling the energy of those early conversations that had spurred him into action. Behind each statistic about improved student engagement was the belief that creativity could awaken potential. It was a delicate dance between information and inspiration, a balance he had not quite mastered before this moment. As he neared the conclusion of his speech, he felt as if the audience was holding their breath, caught in the storm of his passion. Imagine a classroom, he urged, where children are not just learning how to pass tests, but also how to express themselves, to build bridges with their peers. Art is not an extra, it is essential. The words felt bold, galvanizing. They were coming from a place deep within, a reservoir of conviction he hadn't realized he possessed. Nick couldn't help but steal glances at the audience. Some nodded knowingly, while others furrowed their brows, wrestling with the implications of his message. He welcomed both reactions, his heart hammering with the realization that he was challenging the status quo. The moment his speech ended, an applause erupted, not just polite clapping, but an authentic affirmation that surged through the room. It bolstered him, filling the cracks of his self-doubt with fleeting confidence. In that instant, he felt a step closer to the advocate he aspired to become. And yet, as individuals began to approach the podium, their faces illustrating a myriad of reactions, trepidation fluttered back in Nick's gut. Some looked eager to discuss his ideas, while others bore expressions of skepticism. A couple of teachers exchanged knowing glances, murmuring, was he prepared for the discussion to unfold in a manner he did not anticipate? Could he navigate the disagreements, defend his stance, and maintain the fragile momentum he had garnered during his speech? This was merely the beginning, and Nick couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was only just beginning. As he prepared to engage with the audience, he wondered if he could manage to hold on to his newfound voice amidst the impending conflict. Would this moment herald a deeper transformation, not only for the audience, but for himself as he continued to confront lingering fears? There was a palpable tension in the air, an electric buzz filled with potential. The questions hung there, tantalizing, as Nick's mind raced with possibilities. Facing these challenges meant stepping further into uncharted territory, but he realized he was no longer standing on the precipice. He had leaped. What awaited him on the other side felt dangerously intoxicating. And here, in the mingling voices that surrounded him, a deeper purpose began to crystallize. Perhaps this was the true beginning. Perhaps he was simply about to discover what being an advocate truly required of him. As the applause faded, Nick felt the air shift around him, the room a whirlpool of anticipation and skepticism. A woman approached him first, her expression a curious blend of admiration and concern. "That was powerful," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves flickering in her eyes. "But do you really believe you can change minds? It's a tough crowd." Nick nodded, a smile settling on his face, though the tension still curled in his gut. "I believe we can at least start a conversation." "Conversation," she repeated, a touch of skepticism behind her tone. "About what? Why art matters?" "Yes, more than that, though. About how revealing ourselves allows others to connect and understand." As the words spilled, he felt the wealth of his own uncertainties pushing for expression. "We've all been shaped by our experiences, haven't we? What if we shared those stories more openly?" Her gaze softened, and he sensed she was weighing his sincerity against her assumptions of a hopeful idealist. Before she could respond, a middle-aged teacher approached, arms crossed, his brow furrowed with indignation. "This is all very nice, Nick, but how exactly do you propose we change the curriculum? The system is set in stone. You can't just wish for art to take precedence over tested subjects." Nick's heart dropped. There it was, the expected logical pushback. But instead of retreating, he found himself leaning in, the depths of his conviction stirring. "What if I told you that integrating art can actually enhance student performance in those tested subjects? That fostering creativity can lead to critical thinking?" The teacher scoffed, a bemused light dancing in his eyes. "You sound like a utopian dreamer. This isn't a fairy tale." The words stung, slicing through his emerging confidence. Could he really match that skepticism head-on? But as the murmurs of the audience echoed in his ears, something ignited. Perhaps, but every change starts with someone daring to dream. If we don't start here, how will students ever learn to envision a world beyond the limits imposed on them? The teacher hesitated, thrown off guard. That flicker of doubt offered Nick a chance. The suffocating tension in his chest began to dissipate, replaced by an intoxicating blend of bravery and desperation. This was more than just a debate. It was a chance to redefine what it meant to advocate for his vision. As others began to engage, he felt himself entering a rhythm, standing firmly in the crosshairs of criticism while weaving his own narratives through their skepticism. Each dissenting voice became a stepping stone, not a barrier. He was not dancing around fear, he was engaging it directly. He continued to press his points with stories of individuals whose lives changed through artistic expression, stories of resilience, places where art had sparked innovation, and instances where it had dismantled barriers. The audience moved with him, some still reluctant, but others visibly shifting, intrigued by the underlying current he rode. But just as enthusiasm rose like tidewaters, a powerful voice, a principle he recognized, rose above the crowd, calling for attention. "Nick," she said, her expression framed by a mix of challenge and open inquiry, "you're weaving a compelling narrative of change and hope, but if we follow you down this path, what assurances do we have that the status quo won't oppose us? Are you ready to take that risk?" The question knotted his stomach. Assurance was slippery and often illusory. He could advocate for changes, pour his heart into the encouragement of creativity, but how far was he willing to push against the tide? There it was, the precipice he feared yet craved. Nick took a deep breath, his thoughts spiraling through the consequences. Could he gather the courage to face not just the audience, but the established norms that shaped education? "I'm willing to risk everything. The question is, will you join me?" The silence that followed felt electric, charged with possibilities. Nick wondered if this was the moment he was both afraid of and exhilarated by, teetering on the brink of transformation. The eyes studied him, some with newfound respect, others with continuing skepticism. It was going to be a challenge, one that shaped not only his journey, but the future paths of those around him. And suddenly, he realized that he was no longer merely an advocate, but a beacon of change. The journey ahead was strewn with obstacles, but could he channel this momentum into actionable steps? Just then, as he felt a whisper of resolve bloom within him, a figure lingered in the back of the room, eyes calculating. A faint chill set over him. Who was that, and what might their intentions be in this pivotal moment? Nick's gaze darted toward the figure in the back, a sharp contrast to the warmth of hopeful faces surrounding him. The flicker of recognition ignited an unease within him. This was Claire, the district's renowned critic, known for her ruthless evaluations and disdain for anything that diverged from traditional education models. As if sensing his apprehension, she took a step forward, her piercing eyes zeroing in on him. "What you propose," she began, her voice smooth but laced with steel, "is not only idealistic but terribly naive. Do you really think an infusion of art can magically resolve the systemic issues we face? The administration won't just bend over for a dream." His pulse quickened. There was something raw and unsettling about her presence, a reminder of the formidable barriers he faced. But with each word she spoke, he felt a new determination settle in, the urge to defend not just his vision, but the countless students waiting for change. "Claire," he said, striving to match her intensity, "art isn't meant to replace rigorous education, it's meant to enrich it. We're talking about cultivating a generation that can think creatively and critically. Isn't that what we all want?" There was a flicker of surprise in her gaze, as if she hadn't expected him to stand resilient. "You're passionate, I'll give you that," she replied, shifting slightly, her posture reflective but guarded. "But passion alone won't sway this room, or the board. What do you plan to do next? Paint pretty pictures?" The edge of her critique cut deeper than he anticipated. He hadn't felt it, not here, where he thought support would blossom. But as her words echoed in his head, a realization brushed against his consciousness. He didn't want to just paint pretty pictures. He had to craft a strategy, a cohesive plan that drew from his experiences and sharpened arguments. "I will create a working group," he replied, the words flowing from a well of newfound conviction. "We can begin with pilot programs, private workshops, anything to show measurable success. We need examples to counter the skepticism." Some in the audience murmured in curiosity, but Claire cut through them. "Will you deal with the bureaucracy? Will you risk your job to fight for this belief? You could become a martyr for a lost cause rather than lead real change." That word, martyr, twisted in his gut. He thought of his son, the reason he was risking everything. "I wouldn't be a martyr," he countered, his voice steady. "I would be a pioneer. This is about creating opportunities, not just for myself, but for students who are stifled under an outdated system. The risk is immense, yes, but what's the cost of inaction?" A tense silence enveloped them, pregnant with possibilities and doubts. For the first time, he felt the weight of his mission in an almost tangible form. It wasn't merely his career on the line. It was about reshaping futures, ushering in a change that could ripple through generations. Claire held his gaze, and for a fraction of a moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of respect beneath the armor. But the moment dissolved as quickly as it emerged. "Fine," she replied, regaining her composure. "Show me results. Show me you're not just another idealist with empty words. And maybe, just maybe, you'll
have my support." He nodded, accepting the challenge not just as a validation of his conviction, but as a path toward understanding his own limits. The scent of uncertainty lingered, but beneath it was the adrenaline of conviction sparking a flame within him. As the crowd buzzed around them, he caught whispered conversations, a mix of skepticism and intrigue heightened by Claire's stark declaration. A path had been formed, but it was riddled with challenges, and a gut feeling stirred at the realization he needed allies, pragmatic supporters who could rally behind a common vision. The room began to clear, but the last lingering conversations hung in the air. What faces would he seek to unite behind this vision? Who could he trust to charge ahead with him? With each step toward the exit, Nick felt both the burden of looming responsibilities and the thrill of possibility vaulting through him. He could no longer walk this road alone, and he needed to find those who could amplify his message. Yet, amidst the wave of supportive voices beginning to surface, there existed a looming doubt. Was there someone willing to sabotage his efforts already in his midst, ready to strike when he was vulnerable? And as that unsettling question brewed in his mind, Nick knew one thing for certain. The next move would define not just his journey, but the very future of education looming just beyond that pivotal moment. Stepping outside, the cool evening air felt like a refreshing balm against the chaotic flurry of emotions swirling in Nick's mind. The weight of Claire's challenge pressed against him, transforming the stirrings of doubt into determination. Choosing to initiate this journey of change was just the start. Now he needed a strategy, something concrete that could cultivate the seeds of creativity in a system that so often prioritized conformity. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his face in the dim light, an urgent reminder that the world didn't stop for introspection. He scrolled through his contacts, pausing briefly at the names of colleagues who had shared his admiration for progressive teaching. Could they be trusted to join him in this venture? Doubt flickered. Over the years, he had witnessed too many brave initiatives crumble under the weight of bureaucratic inertia or personal apathy. "Who's ready to take a leap?" he mumbled to himself as he began drafting an email. He envisioned a workshop session where educators could come together to brainstorm and innovate. If he could demonstrate the tangible benefits of art-infused curricula, it would give them the groundwork they needed to move the conversation forward, and perhaps even bring Claire around to their side. After painstakingly polishing the email to draw in potential allies, Nick clicked send and let out a deep exhale, feeling a rush of adrenaline. This was it. He was no longer just a voice echoing in the uncertainties of the room. He was beginning to take concrete action. Yet, with each passing moment, the reality of his own.
Limitations crept back in. Even with passionate support, how much could one workshop truly accomplish? That night, restlessness consumed him. Lying in bed, he replayed Claire's words, a poignant reminder of the scrutiny he would face. While her direct confrontation had initially shaken him, now it served as a silent mentor whose doubts prodded him to sharpen his resolve. He envisioned Claire's skeptical stare as a constant motivator, an ever-present voice urging him to substantiate every passion with actionable outcomes. The following week was a whirlwind of meetings and brainstorming sessions. As Nick enlisted colleagues to help shape his vision into a formal proposal, he discovered a latent ability to galvanize enthusiasm in others. With every meeting, he became more fluid in articulating his ideas, framing them not as isolated whims, but as essential transformations vital to fostering a vibrant learning environment. He also honed his research skills, delving into case studies that demonstrated the positive impacts of integrating arts into education. Yet, the more clarity he found, the more he sensed a counterforce growing within the administration. There were murmurs of resistance swelling amongst his peers. Some believed passionately in the status quo, and their apprehensions echoed in the patter of whispers he passed in the hallways. He didn't just need to win a battle. He needed to win hearts and minds, to change perspectives so deeply entrenched they felt immovable. Nick was acutely aware of the brewing storm. Was there a faction quietly working against him? This undeniable suspicion fueled his motivation, but veered dangerously toward paranoia. It was critical that he identified those willing to support the shift, to stand shoulder to shoulder in what felt increasingly like a crusade. Each interaction carried a pulse of tension. He could feel how fragile the alliance was. Did his colleagues truly share his vision, or were they merely placating him, waiting for the tide to shift before retreating to safer shores? Days turned into frenetic weeks as he organized potential workshops and gathered materials. And just when he believed he was gaining momentum, an unexpected roadblock arose. The principal called for a meeting with him. As Nick entered her office, a knot tightened in his stomach. Was this an inquiry, a cautious offer of support, or a harbinger of insidious opposition? With each breath, he prepared for the confrontation ahead, acutely aware that this moment would shape his vision and could potentially unravel all that he had worked to build. He stepped inside, ready to fight for the change he believed could revolutionize education, a war not just against bureaucracy, but against doubt itself. Would he come out unscathed, or was the end of this road just the beginning of a more turbulent journey? The principal sat behind her imposing desk, her expression inscrutable, and Nick felt the weight of silence pressing down around them. The walls were adorned with motivational posters, but their messages felt hollow against the tension in the room. It was here, in this box of authority, that Nick would either extend his reach or feel it abruptly pulled away. "Nick, thank you for coming," she began, her voice smooth yet carrying an undertone of caution. It struck him that this meeting could easily tilt in any direction. Alternatively, he could embrace this as an opportunity to present his vision directly, to win her over before any of his plans could be undermined. "Of course, I value your guidance," he replied, forcing confidence into his voice. Inside, he was a tempest of nerves wrestling with doubt. Should he lead with the research he had gathered on art in education, or should he first address the whispers he suspected were coiling like serpents among his colleagues? "I've seen your recent proposals, and truthfully, they are bold," she acknowledged, her tone shifting slightly, hinting at an opening. "But I wonder if you fully grasp the implications they carry." Nick felt the chill of her skepticism settle in the pit of his stomach. What implications?
Was this another way of saying they might disrupt the balance of the current curriculum? Biting back his instinctive defensiveness, he leaned forward, ready to pivot the conversation. I believe they can enrich the student experience, especially in fostering creativity and self-expression, he asserted, catching the glimmer of interest in her eye. If engaging her could alter the trajectory of his ambitions, he needed to articulate a vision both aligned with the school's goals and distinct from the mundane options they currently entertained. In my research, I found compelling examples where integrating art has not only improved engagement, but also academic performance overall. I'm not just suggesting it for its own sake. It's a response to what students really need today, a comprehensive approach to learning, not just rote memorization. She studied him closely, weighing his words. The conversation flickered between hope and trepidation, the stakes rising with each moment of silence. Creativity is one thing, but we must also ensure we adhere to the standards set by the district. There are complications. Complications? He recognized the familiar entanglement of rules and regulations threatening to ensnare his ambitions. Was this a veiled warning against his plans, or a challenge, an invitation to navigate the red tape more astutely? Would it help to present data-driven forecasts to outline how these changes could align with our academic goals? Perhaps I could also share testimonials from other institutions where similar initiatives have thrived. The reminding shadows of doubt loomed large, but Nick fought fiercely against them, unwilling to back down. She leaned back, skepticism flickering in her gaze. Yet he saw the gears turning in her mind. This was a dance, one he had never considered himself skilled at, but necessity sharpened his instincts, and he pushed forward. The world is changing, and so must we, he continued, pulling from every ounce of conviction he had. This isn't just about art, it's about preparing our students for a dynamic future. I'm ready to work with you to ensure we frame this in a way that fits within every guideline. Her expression softened marginally, but he sensed the crux of their interaction was still unaddressed. They weren't just discussing programs, they were negotiating the breadth of his influence. Then prepare to show me how you can garner support from your colleagues, she said finally, the firm line of her mouth lingering slightly, a challenge disguised as an invitation. Your vision needs to resonate beyond your own enthusiasm. As Nick exited her office, uncertainty clouded the clarity he had fought hard to achieve. He could feel the stakes rising higher, his allies unsure in their commitment. If he failed to harness this momentum, all he envisioned could unravel before his eyes. With invigorated purpose, he resolved to approach the naysayers strategically and cultivate their interest rather than simply confronting hostility. It was a turning point. He would not let fear anchor him to complacency. Nick's heart raced, fueled by resolve. The conversation had sparked potential, but it was only part of a larger game. His next move would determine not just his professional ambitions, but his capacity to wield influence in the very corridors that now felt so daunting. The time had come to expand his strategy and face those doubts directly. He prepared to confront not just resistance, but the fears of those who might ultimately become his allies. Did he have the fortitude to galvanize them, or would he find himself standing alone in the very battle he had started? As days melted into weeks, Nick's determination solidified into a tangible plan. With Claire's initial skepticism still fresh in his mind, he coordinated a series of small workshops designed to champion the benefits of art in education. Each session was purposefully crafted to draw in both supporters and skeptics, bridging the gap between the two factions. The first workshop was a modest success. The energy in the room swelled with cautious enthusiasm as educators traded insights. However, he also met resistance. Would-be allies voiced doubts about the practicality of his vision. Nick listened carefully, turning their critiques into opportunities for deeper dialogue.
He cultivated a space where their concerns validated, yet challenged the status quo. His confidence grew. With every workshop, information about the transformative power of art in education flowed freely. Educators shared anecdotes of students whose lives were positively changed through creative expression, kids who found their voice, their purpose. As the narratives unfolded, Nick felt the power of their collective stories strengthen his resolve. He stood on the shoulders of giants, using their triumphs to elucidate why art should have a prominent place in the curriculum. Yet with each step forward, he felt shadows of resistance creeping in. Claire's warnings festered in his mind. Was his growing influence attracting unwelcome scrutiny? One afternoon, whispers reached his ears. Doubts were brewing within administrative circles. Rumors hinted at the likelihood of pushback against Nick's initiatives. But with these uncertainties arose a burning desire to foster an allyship, one that would encompass not only artists, but also traded skeptics. As Nick prepared for yet another workshop, he decided to extend invitations personally. He scoured the faculty list, looking for teachers whose opinions could sway the narrative. He sought the reluctant ones, those questioning the purpose of infusing creativity into education. Phone calls turned into meetings, fostering a network that morphed from mere acquaintances into a tight-knit community unified by the shared goal. Over coffee and shared frustrations, he ignited discussions that unraveled fundamental misconceptions. Then came the breakthrough, a pivotal invitation extended during one of these gatherings, a collaborative project that encapsulated everything they had discussed. An art show intertwined with subjects, showcasing student work across various disciplines. Each teacher would contribute, seamlessly blending art with lessons that reinforced their own curriculum. He sensed the shift in energy, the flicker of hope igniting amidst doubts. But were they truly on board, or simply accommodating his passion? Nick felt uneasy, grappling with a reality where every step could spell victory or disappointment. Those torn reservations began to shift as colleagues rallied behind his vision, visualizing an event that could redefine the school's ethos. With the art show a few weeks away, Nick juggled mounting responsibilities. There were late nights, countless emails, and energizing conversations charged with excitement. Little by little, a palpable tension grew around the upcoming exhibition. A storm brewing on the horizon, heightened by specifics and hopes transformed into something palpable. On the night of the event, Nick's heart thundered in his chest as he stood amidst a transformed gymnasium. The walls became portals of imagination, adorned with vivid canvases reflecting students' artistic expressions. Parents, teachers, and local community members ambled through, their conversations weaving a tapestry of admiration and curiosity. Nick glided through the crowd with palpable excitement, aware of the diverse responses simmering amongst onlookers. As conversations around him echoed the very discussions he ignited, he felt the weight of his journey transform into exhilaration. However, Claire loomed, her critical eye present and judgment palpable as she surveyed the atmosphere. What would she think? Would this foster acceptance of his visions, or would she remain steadfast in her resistance? When she approached him later in the evening, a tension locked between them. "This is quite impressive, Nick," she said, though his instincts screamed a cautionary note verging on condescension. "You've managed to gather quite an audience." Her tone was layered, an invitation for acknowledgement, but perhaps also an invitation for reason, an opening to challenge the rise of art in their curriculum. "Thank you," Nick replied, summoning the confidence he had worked tirelessly to cultivate. "It isn't just about me, it's about every child who benefits from creative expression. Art isn't a luxury, it's essential. Tonight shows our students' need for it." The conversation teetered between recognition and defensiveness. Good intentions don't guarantee future success. You must understand the intricacies of curriculum standards even more deeply than you do now. What makes you believe you can sustain this momentum? Because I see the potential. Spark in our students, Nick shot back, unwavering. Every artist has been told no or not possible. It's time for us to change the narrative. The proof will be in these stories. Though skeptical, he saw doubt flicker in Claire's gaze. The narrative around them was shifting, even if she remained staunchly resistant. Perhaps she would concede, perhaps not, but the art show heralded undeniable progress. Nick realized he had cultivated more than just art. He had cultivated community. In that moment, he glimpsed beyond the immediate horizon of skepticism, a landscape of possibility crafting itself anew. He felt the stirrings of pride as parents approached him, thanking him for lifting their children's voices. It was more than a mere exhibition. It was a reflection of collaborative achievement. Nick stepped away, absorbing the environment around him. He had built bridges, transformed perspectives, and demonstrated the very essence of what he stood for. As the noise of celebration continued to rise, he recognized that he had finally made a mark, a definitive pivot from solitary voices to a unified chorus advocating for change. The culmination of this journey wasn't just the art show. It was a recognition of his own voice, reshaped and redefined. Swimming within newfound confidence, he sensed an innate desire to keep advocating. The fear that had once bound him was now a distant echo. Nick knew his journey was not over. It had merely transitioned into a new phase. He would continue forging paths for himself and those around him. Tonight, he conquered not just the doubts of others, but his own inner battles. A warrior of change forged in the furnace of uncertainty and hope, finally standing tall, illuminated by the creativity he had uncovered within himself. As he left the gymnasium, he felt an electricity thrumming through him, a surge of purpose propelling him forward. He was no longer merely the janitor. He was an advocate, a leader charting uncharted waters. As each dawn approached, he would champion the importance of creativity, emboldened by the triumphs of every student and parent who believed in the power of expression just as fiercely as he did. This was his moment to embrace the future. Would he continue to champion change? Would he advocate from a place of love and respect for all perspectives? The answers swirled through him like vibrant colors on a canvas, rich with the promise of transformation and the undeniable realization that he was indeed on a path to reshaping the narrative of education. Now, more than ever, the urgency to act resonated. Nick grasped that this was the foundation on which he would continue to build, a fortified commitment to uplift others, honoring every artist's journey. He stepped into the night, ready to turn the page of possibility, daring to dream further than he had allowed himself before. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. This is the moment to show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.